everyone, my name is Parker, and I'm doing a presentation on interpersonal communication. And I'm going to be talking about the relationships through interpersonal communication and the development between all that types of different things. So let's get right into it. So I want to first go over what is interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication is the daily face-to-face interactions that exchange information through verbal and nonverbal messages. It is a very direct communication. Similar to its name, it is very personal and is also a very improv style. This form of communication is most commonly used. It is the most known style that most people typically just go right to because it's quick to understand, quick to learn new things about different people, and to gather information. I'm going to pass out some notes that I took for my power presentation, so if you have any questions, the notes have a little bit more detail in the different slides we're going to be going through. As well, you could also look here to keep track of where we're going. I'm going to pass these out. So I'm also going to be talking about why is it important? Why is interpersonal communication an important topic to be talking about? Interpersonal communication is a direct effect on developing relationships. And the communication systems that we create are actually self-concepts. And what are self-concepts? Self-concepts are different types of characteristics and emotions that create who we are. So it's actually presenting ourselves as our own self-concept. So let's get right into communication relationships. Communication relationships are always developed between an interpersonal communication, making connections on a deeper level between experiences or even beliefs or ideas that one may have. These types of relationships tend to last longer than normal ones just because you're on a deeper level with someone. You're making more connections. So a more interpersonal relationship would be something like family, friends, or even a significant other. And this is something that all humans need. We all need to be able to connect and cooperate with each other through relationships. So human communication. Communication is very simple. All it is really just transferring messages. And we can even see here on the slide that it actually kind of fits in that little formula right there, that when a source initiates the message to a receiver, the message being transferred to the receiver has been encoded. When the receiver decodes the message to their best understanding, and that's how a message essentially gets sent. You may say something to one person, but they might perceive it in a different way. And that's kind of how all interactions happen through communication. And these are just some vocabulary of different words that I used that last slide. There's also on the notes as well if you want to review them real quick. And now I'm going to be moving and shifting the presentation to talk about disconfirmations. And disconfirmations are simply rejecting messages that a recipient has that could lower their self-respect or even damage the relationship. There are 7 main disconfirmations that a person may have or interact with in different types of communications. So the first one would be impervious response. And this is when one individual ignores another. And then what that's really telling another person is that they're not really worth noticing or even listening to. And it's also somewhat disrespectful when you also do not acknowledge another person talking to you. Another one that's kind of similar is interrupting response. This is when someone just says something and blurts out right in front of someone else's talk or speech that they may be saying. And this is pretty straightforward. This tells another person that you're not really worth listening to. Irrelevant response. This is when someone changes the topic in the middle of you talking about something. So you might be talking about an issue like your car breaking down, and someone might talk about where you might want to go for lunch that day. They don't really interact and they don't really sync very well together. Tangible responses. In the slide it says it's very similar to an irrelevant response where the receiver of whatever the original subject might be acknowledges the subject, but decides it's not really that interesting and actually will decide to change the subject to something that might interest themselves a little bit more. So they might even be talking about something personal that happened to you, but then the receiver might change it to something about them. And that could also be something that could damage a relationship through communication. Impersonal responses, this is language This is actually one of the first ones we're going to be talking about that distance yourself directly from another person. So using these type of languages would actually push yourself immediately away from another person. A common phrase that people say is, I feel uncomfortable being around you. All right, that's a common phrase that people would say to say, listen man, I don't want to be hanging out with you anymore. All right, and that demonstrates discomfort and unlikableness. Incoherent responses, this is when actions or communications tells the receiver that they are embarrassed to be around them. This is another one that happens where people, an action or phrase someone might have said out loud, makes another person feel very uncomfortable being around them, or even somewhat embarrassed to be associated with that person. This could happen a lot of times in groups. Let's move on to the next one. And this is our last one, and it's incongruous responses. And this is the last one that actually distances yourself from another person, and this is when the receiver does not want to deal with whatever issues you got going on in a very direct and open way. So in a case like that, it could be you might have an issue saying that relating to family, and the person doesn't feel comfortable talking about that, so they decide to back off and not even give you a very indirect response to that. And all these different disconfirmations are actually used to damage relationships and leads to people actually moving on and distancing yourself from you. And that's just not counting the last three, but that counts for all of them. In that said, I kind of want to talk about a worksheet I'm going to be passing out. And this worksheet actually has different examples of different disconfirmations. And I'm asking in this worksheet if you can identify the different disconfirmations that are used in each scenario and identify what message is being said. So for example, the first one says person A would say hello, and person B says continues reading and ignores person A. So that one would be very simple to figure out. That would be ignoring someone. So that would be an impervious response. And the implicit message would be that you're not worth listening to. So I'm going to be passing that out, and you could work on it. And I think as I finish up these last few slides, we could go over it at the end. And now I'm going to be talking about why was this whole thing important? Why is it even important to know what not to say to another person? And that's quite simple. When you're trying to develop a relationship on a deeper and more personal level, you need to know the different types of things to say and what not to say, because this could all damage or improve relationships depending on each different scenario. These different relationships can also stimulate success in the workplace, for leadership as well, and even knowing something, just even knowing what to say at the right times can make you as a person more likable and enjoyable to be around. These are some of the sources that I used, and I'm going to be pretty much wrapping up this last presentation. The direct connections of interpersonal communication and communication are intertwined with each other. You can't have a relationship if you're not communicating properly, and I hope that you guys learned something a little bit about interpersonal communication and its effects on direct communication. Thank you.